We can fill it out after the paternity test, I said, without raising my voice even as the room seemed to stop breathing. My words landed like a grenade. Melissa looked up from the hospital bed, cradling the newborn girl in her arms. Her mother froze. My own mother stared at me like I'd just committed an unspeakable sin. That was the moment everything shifted. My name is Ethan Russell. I'm 39 years old. I've spent the last 14 years working as a senior technician at a logistics firm in Austin, Texas. I'm the guy who doesn't miss a shift, who trains new hires without complaining, who brings extra tools in case someone else forgets theirs. I married Melissa 9 years ago. I thought I knew the kind of woman she was. I thought I was building a family I could trust. But over the last year, I started noticing cracks, little things that didn't make sense. Late night texts she wouldn't explain, a sudden distance. My gut told me something was wrong, but I ignored it for months thinking I was just being paranoid. Until I wasn't. Melissa had just given birth. Her face glistened with sweat and pride. The baby girl was bundled in pink, breathing softly against her chest. My mother, Janice, stood on one side of the bed. Melissa's mother, Karen, stood on the other. Both of them wore that glow only grandmothers can manage until I shattered it with one sentence. The nurse had stepped in with a clipboard and said cheerfully, "Mr. Russell, if you'd like to fill out the birth certificate." That's when I dropped the hammer. "We'll do that," I said, after we confirm who the father is. Melissa blinked. Once, twice. Then her entire expression collapsed. "What the hell are you talking about?" she hissed, her voice low but laced with panic. "I'm talking about the truth," I replied, "and I'm done pretending I don't see it." Karen gasped. "Ethan, you can't say something like that right now of all times." Janice didn't speak, but I felt her eyes drilling into me. I didn't flinch. I wasn't doing this for attention. I was doing it because I was done being lied to. Melissa's eyes filled with tears, but I saw the fear in them. Not pain, not confusion. Fear. "Are you accusing me of cheating?" she said louder now. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "No," I said. "I'm stating that you did." The room exploded in voices. Karen pleaded. Janice scolded. The nurse quickly backed out, realizing she didn't want to be part of this. But I stood still. "I have the messages, Melissa," I said. "From you to Cameron. I know everything." She looked like she had been slapped. "You what? Who?" I reached into my pocket and took out the folded printout. I had highlighted the message that changed everything for me. "My husband can never know about us." I read it aloud, slowly, clearly, like reading a statement in court. Melissa's shoulders curled inward. She cradled the baby tighter as if she could hide behind her. Janice finally stepped forward. "Ethan, please, that child might still be yours." "We'll know soon enough," I said. "But if she isn't, don't expect me to stay in this house. Or this marriage." Karen looked like she was about to collapse. "You're heartless," she whispered. "She just gave birth. You're going to destroy her." I turned to her, voice calm but cold. "She destroyed us a long time ago. I wasn't looking for revenge. I just needed answers and boundaries. I waited until after the delivery for a reason," I said. "I didn't want to cause stress during the pregnancy, but now the baby is here, and so is the truth." Melissa buried her face in the crook of her arm. She didn't deny the affair, not once. She just cried. I stepped back from the bed. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. "From this point on, I'm doing what I should have done months ago. I'm setting limits." Janice opened her mouth, probably to beg me to calm down or wait or think about the baby, but I raised my hand. "This is not up for discussion. I'll be taking the paternity test as soon as possible, and once I have the results, we all move forward accordingly." Then I looked straight at Melissa and said the one thing I knew would stay with her. "I hope for your sake that baby is mine, because if she's not, this family ends today." And with that, I walked out of the room. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen of my apartment, staring at the single coffee mug I always used. The silence was thick. No crying baby, no footsteps, no nervous laughter from Melissa trying to smooth over the tension she always pretended not to notice. For the first time in years, I was alone in my own home, and it felt more like peace than loneliness. "I'm Ethan Russell. You already know what happened at the hospital. You know I walked out. What you might not know is I had already made all the arrangements before I ever walked in. People think betrayal happens in one instant, like a light switch flipping off. But that's not how it works, not for me. For me, it was a slow suffocation. Every lie, every dodged question, every excuse, it chipped away at something inside me until finally I had nothing left to give. 4 months ago, I started suspecting Melissa was hiding something. She became protective of her phone. She started locking her screen before walking into the kitchen. The intimacy between us disappeared overnight. I knew something was off. I just couldn't prove it. Then one night I stayed up late after she went to bed. Her phone lit up on the nightstand. She had forgotten to silence it. I saw the name Cameron R., a message preview. You should have been the father. That was all it took. I didn't confront her. I didn't lose my temper. I took a screenshot. Then I did what any calm, calculated man would do. I began preparing. Over the next few weeks, I quietly gathered evidence. Messages, email logs, a photograph of the two of them walking out of a bar one night when she claimed she was at a prenatal yoga class. I also spoke to a lawyer, and I waited. Why? Because I didn't want her to miscarry from stress. As much as I had started to resent her, I couldn't bring myself to endanger an unborn child, possibly my own. So I played the game. I smiled. I paid the hospital bills. I attended appointments when invited, all while quietly dying inside. That's why when I said at the hospital that I wasn't guessing, I meant it. I knew. Back at my apartment, I pulled open the drawer where I had already packed Melissa's things, her cosmetics, her mail, even her bathrobe. I had boxed it all a week ago. All that was left was to get it to her mother's house. When my phone rang, I already knew who it would be. Ethan, please, my mom's voice came through the line. We need to talk. We already did, Mom, I said. You were there. She just had a baby. I'm aware. She's suffering. So was I. She went quiet. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. What if the baby is yours? I exhaled, not in anger, just tired. If she's mine, I said, I'll do what's right by her. She'll have a father. But I will not stay married to Melissa. That's not fair to the baby. What wasn't fair, I replied, was bringing a child into a lie. That's on her. Later that day, I met with the hospital's lab technician to arrange the DNA test. Melissa didn't speak to me. She avoided eye contact. Karen, her mom, stood nearby, stiff and disapproving. I said nothing. The nurse handed me a clipboard. I signed the form, swabbed my cheek. Done in under 5 minutes. Funny how fast truth can move once you stop hiding from it. As I was leaving, Karen stopped me in the hallway. She still loves you, Ethan, she said quietly. I turned to her calm. Then she had a funny way of showing it. She made a mistake. No, Karen. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. This was a choice. That evening, I finally responded to Melissa's earlier messages. She'd sent 3, all within an hour of me walking out of the hospital. We need to talk. You're overreacting. This isn't the time to do this. I typed a short reply. The time was 4 months ago. Now it's truth or nothing. She never answered. I went to bed early that night. No TV, no music. Just darkness and the soft hum of the fridge. In the stillness, I thought about everything I'd given to this marriage. The weekends I worked extra shifts so we could afford a nursery. The nights I made dinner while she said she was too nauseous to stand. The hours I spent researching baby names while she was busy texting another man. And in that silence, I made peace with one thing. I would not be guilted into saving what she chose to destroy. You're cruel, Ethan. You're acting like a monster. That's what Karen said to me right in the middle of the hospital hallway as a nurse wheeled past with a tray of medication. She wasn't whispering either. She wanted everyone to hear it, and they did. I stood there, hands in my pockets, jaw clenched. Not because her words hurt me, but because I'd already heard them in my own head dozens of times over the past few weeks. When I imagined how this would all play out, I knew this moment was coming. In the chaos after I confronted Melissa, people reacted exactly how I expected, like I was the villain. My mom Janice had kept it together in the room, but later in the hallway her voice cracked when she caught up to me. She just had a baby, she said, grabbing my elbow. This isn't the time to blow up her world. I looked her in the eye. So when is the right time, Mom? Next week after I bond with a child that might not be mine? Or 10 years from now when she decides to tell me over dinner? She pulled back, stunned. But not because I was wrong, because I was right, and she didn't want to admit it. I've always been the calm one in the family, the steady one. Never the loudest voice at the table, never the one to pick fights. I was the one who made peace when others couldn't. That's probably why this hit them so hard they didn't expect me to take a stand like this. But I wasn't standing for revenge. I was standing for myself. Later that night, Janice came to my apartment. I didn't invite her, but I didn't shut the door either. She walked in like she'd done 1,000 times before, heading straight for the kitchen. I brought soup, she said, holding up a container. I raised an eyebrow. You're bringing soup to the man you said was heartless. She set the container on the counter, her mouth tight. I didn't say heartless. I said, you could have handled it better. I sat down at the table. Tell me how, Mom. Tell me how to calmly find out your wife cheated, possibly had another man's child, and pretend it's not happening. She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. Karen, on the other hand, didn't even pretend to be understanding. The next day, she called me from her daughter's hospital room. You embarrassed her, she snapped. She betrayed me, I replied. She was vulnerable. She was sleeping with another man. She was scared, and I was loyal. The line went silent. Then she hung up. Here's the thing people don't get. It's easier to defend the crying woman in the hospital bed than the man who quietly bleeds in private. They see the tears and the baby and the heartbreak, and they assume one thing, that the man must have done something wrong to deserve it. Nobody asked what the man went through. Nobody asked what he sacrificed for that relationship. But I didn't need validation. I wasn't waiting for applause. I just needed the truth to stop hiding. 2 days later, the fallout continued. Melissa's brother texted me saying, man to man, this wasn't right. I sent back, tell your sister that. He didn't reply. Some friends unfollowed me on social media. A couple of co-workers gave me awkward looks when I came into the office. I could see the judgment in their eyes, the half-told story already spreading. She dropped the baby and he walked out. No, dude, she had the baby and he demanded a test right then. He said she cheated, but maybe he's just being paranoid. Let them talk, I didn't care. Because the truth has a cost, but so does silence. And I'd paid in silence long enough. Back at the hospital, Melissa still hadn't reached out. Karen kept texting me, alternating between rage and guilt. At one point she wrote, you still have a chance to fix this. I stared at that message for a long time. Fix this. Fix what? A broken plate can be glued back together. But would you ever eat off it again? On the third day, I got a call from the lab. Mr. Russell, your results will be available by Friday. Do you want us to call or send an email? I chose the email. I didn't want to hear anyone's voice, just the facts. Cold, clinical, undeniable. Before the call ended, the woman on the other end paused. I don't mean to intrude, she said gently, but I saw what happened the day you came in. That was brave. I didn't know how to respond, so I said the only honest thing I could think of. It wasn't brave, it was overdue. The email came at 6:43 a.m. on a Friday morning. Subject: paternity test results. I sat at the edge of the bed staring at the screen, the cursor hovering over the unopened message. The sun hadn't even risen yet. The apartment was dead silent, no cars, no voices, no crying newborns. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the weight of the answer sitting in my inbox. I clicked it. And just like that, everything changed. My name is Ethan Russell. You already know me by now. I'm not the emotional type. I don't yell. I don't throw things. But when I read the words probability of paternity 0%, I felt something inside me go completely still. It wasn't rage, it wasn't sadness. It was the sound of a door closing. I shut the laptop, slowly got up and poured myself a glass of water. My hand didn't shake. My breath didn't quicken. I wasn't surprised, just resolved. 2 hours later, I was standing outside Karen's house. I hadn't planned to go there, but something told me it was time to end this face-to-face. I rang the doorbell and waited. Melissa answered. She was in sweats, hair, tied back, eyes red. She looked older, smaller, but she still tried to muster some false hope. You came, she whispered. I'm here to see your mom, I said plainly. Her face dropped, but she nodded and stepped aside. She's in the kitchen. As I walked in, I saw Janice first. She was holding the baby, my not daughter, cradling her gently like she used to hold me when I scraped my knees as a kid. Her face lit up when she saw me. Ethan, she said, hopeful look, she has your eyes. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled the folded paper from my coat pocket and handed it to Karen, who was sitting at the table sipping tea like nothing had happened. Read it, I said. She hesitated. Out loud, I added. Karen's fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. Her lips moved slowly as she read the line that mattered most. Probability of paternity 0%. There was a pause, and then she slumped into her chair like someone had just cut her strings. Janice stepped back, the baby still in her arms, blinking in disbelief. I wanted you both to know, I said. Now that we have the truth, there's nothing left to discuss. Janice opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. No more pushing, no more guilt trips, no more think of the child. That child is not mine. I turned to Karen. Take care of her, or don't. It's not my problem anymore. Then I looked at Melissa, who hadn't moved from the hallway. You lied to me for months. You carried another man's baby and looked me in the eye every day like nothing was wrong. She whispered something, but I didn't care to listen. I came today not for closure, I continued, but to set boundaries. I will not be manipulated. I will not be involved. You made your choices. Live with them. As I turned to leave, I felt a hand grab my wrist. It was Janice. Ethan, she said softly, don't walk away like this. I looked her in the eyes. You want to take care of her? That's your choice, but don't expect me to. She is your friend's daughter, not your daughter-in-law. Not anymore. She said nothing. Just stood there, the baby resting on her chest, her expression slowly collapsing into something I hadn't seen in her in years regret. I reached the door, hand on the knob, when her voice came again. Wait. I turned halfway. Drop me off, she said. I blinked. What? I'm done here, she said, glancing over her shoulder at Karen and Melissa. They need each other. I need my son. The drive back to my apartment was quiet. Janice didn't say a word until we were almost home. I wanted her to be your daughter, she whispered. I know. I thought maybe you two could work it out. I know. And when I saw her in that hospital bed holding the baby, I just wanted it all to be true. I nodded, so did I. Back at the apartment, we didn't talk much. She made coffee. I sat at the counter. She handed me the mug with both hands like she used to when I was a boy sick with the flu. I'm sorry, she said, sitting beside me. For what? For not choosing you sooner. I looked at her. Her face was older now, more tired than I remembered. But her eyes, they were steady. You did now, I said. And that was enough. That night, after everything had been said and done, my mother stayed over. It wasn't planned. It just happened. She was sitting on the edge of the couch with her tea untouched, staring blankly at the wall like she was looking through it. I offered to drive her home. She shook her head. I don't want to go back to that house tonight. Neither did I. So I pulled out the old guest blanket, fluffed up the couch pillows, and let silence do the rest of the talking. I didn't sleep much. Even in the quiet of my apartment, even with Melissa and her lies far away, my mind didn't stop. The last few months, every moment of second-guessing, every quiet night I spent wondering if I was the one going crazy kept flashing back like broken film. And now that I had my answer, the clarity didn't feel like freedom. It felt like wreckage. Around 2 a.m., I wandered into the kitchen for a glass of water. I found Mom already there, sitting in the dark, a candle flickering on the table. One of those lavender ones she always kept. You're awake, I said. She nodded. Too much noise in my head. I sat down across from her. There was a long pause before either of us spoke again. Then quietly she said, I never wanted it to come to this. I looked at her. She was cradling the tea mug, now warming her hands against it. I didn't want you to lose your wife, she continued, eyes downcast. I didn't want to lose the little dream I had in my head about grandbabies, family dinners, holiday mornings. You didn't lose them, I said. You never had them to begin with. She was living a lie and we were just extras in her story. She looked at me, the pain in her eyes raw. I just didn't want to admit it, she whispered. I know, I replied. It's easier to believe in what we want than to see what's right in front of us. Then her voice cracked. I failed you. That hit harder than I expected. You didn't fail me, I said more softly than I thought I could. You were just trying to hold everything together. She shook her head. I took her side at the hospital. I told you to back down. I told you you were being cruel. But the truth is, I just didn't want to believe that someone I trusted like my own daughter could do something like that. There it was. The honesty, the acknowledgement, and somehow it broke the last wall I'd been holding up. I looked at her, really looked, and I saw not just my mother, but a woman who had been carrying her own grief, her own guilt. She had stood between me and the truth for too long, not because she wanted to hurt me, but because she didn't know how to face it herself. I needed you, Mom, I said quietly. When all this started happening, when I first began to suspect her, I felt like I was going crazy, and I had no one to talk to. Her eyes welled up. I'm sorry, she said again. You should have never had to go through that alone. She reached out and I let her take my hand. Her fingers were warm, strong, just like they were when I was a kid, and she used to brush the hair off my forehead when I was sick. You didn't cave, she whispered. You didn't scream or lash out or do something stupid. You stood your ground, Ethan. You were strong, stronger than I ever gave you credit for. That hit me harder than any apology. I'm proud of you, she added, her voice barely above a breath. I just needed to say it out loud. We sat there for a long time, just holding hands in the dim glow of candlelight. There was no more anger, no more tension, just a quiet sense of return. A mother and son finding their way back to each other after a storm neither of them had asked for. Eventually she let go and stood up. Let me make you something to eat, she said, wiping her eyes. You haven't eaten all day. I smiled. Some things never change. Damn right, she said with a tired laugh. While she moved about the kitchen, I sat there watching her. This wasn't the ending I imagined, but maybe it was the beginning of something better. The illusions were gone, sure, but what was left was real. And sometimes that's enough. I'd never been inside a courtroom before. Not for anything serious anyway. The fluorescent lighting, the wood-paneled walls, the dull echo of shoes on polished tile, it all felt like a place designed to drain the color out of life. And maybe that was fitting, because by the time the divorce hearing started, every ounce of emotion I had left for Melissa had already faded to gray. I'm Ethan Russell, and what you're about to hear isn't a tale of justice. It's a lesson in how far someone will go to rewrite the story after getting caught. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s, face, sharp as glass, voice, even sharper. From the second she took her seat, I knew she didn't like me. "Mr. Russell," she said, during her opening remarks, "this court does not look kindly upon abandonment of family responsibilities." I sat still. My jaw didn't clench. My face didn't move. I had been warned men in divorce court are often presumed guilty unless proven otherwise. Melissa sat across the aisle from me, flanked by her attorney, dressed in pale blue, like someone trying to look soft and wronged. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. No wedding ring. She looked like a victim. And for a moment, I wondered if anyone here would see through that act. My lawyer, Ron Lane, stood tall, quiet, serious, mid-40s. The kind of man who doesn't bluff, doesn't posture. He let the evidence speak, and we had plenty. "Your Honor," Ron began, "this is not a case of abandonment. This is a case of betrayal. My client, Mr. Russell, has come forward with proof texts, photos, and a paternity test showing that his wife was engaged in a long-term affair and knowingly passed off another man's child as his." The judge frowned. Melissa lowered her gaze, playing her part well. Then her attorney spoke. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges her mistake, but the focus here should be on the child's well-being. This is a time for healing, not retribution." Healing. They always say that after the damage is done. Melissa took the stand. Her voice trembled just enough to sound rehearsed. "I didn't mean to hurt Ethan," she said. "He was always away for work. Sometimes weeks at a time. I felt alone, like I wasn't even married anymore." I didn't look at her. Because if I did, I'd see the same lips that had kissed me goodnight after texting another man. "I met Cameron at work," she continued. "He listened to me. We connected. I know it was wrong, but I didn't plan for this. I didn't want it to go that far." Ron stood. "Mrs. Russell, after you found out you were pregnant, did you end contact with Mr. Reed?" "Yes," she said quickly. He nodded, then held up a folder. "Exhibit C, messages sent during her pregnancy. Dozens." She shared her feelings. She called him baby and even told him not to worry because, and I quote, "Ethan will never find out." Melissa's face went pale. The courtroom shifted. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't prove I was still sleeping with him," she said. Ron smiled slightly. "Perhaps not, but it proves you didn't cut ties. It proves deception." The judge tapped her pen against her notes. "Continue, Mr. Lane." Ron turned to Melissa again. "Did you ever tell Ethan you felt neglected? Did you communicate your needs to him before turning to someone else?" She hesitated. "No." "Did Ethan ever abuse you?" "No." "Did he provide for you financially?" "Yes." "Did he show affection?" Was. "Yes." Ron nodded slowly. "So you cheated not because your husband failed you. You cheated because you were lonely and because you could." Silence. Melissa didn't respond. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Ron turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we've heard how Mr. Russell is supposedly a neglectful husband, and yet Mrs. Russell now seeks reconciliation. Why, if he was so terrible, why does she want him back? Why does she want him to raise a child that isn't his?" Melissa's lip quivered. "Because I love him," she suddenly burst out. "He's a good man. I know I ruined things, but he's the only one who can give this child a future." There it was, the emotional card, but the wrong one to play. "Because then," Ron asked the question we had waited the entire hearing to ask. "Then why did you cheat on him?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. When she finally answered, her voice cracked. "I don't know. I was horny. I wanted something different." A stunned murmur swept through the room. Even the judge looked down, rubbing her temple like she'd just aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "That will be enough," the judge said, voice dry. "Step down." Melissa sat silent, face buried in her hands. When the hearing adjourned, I stood and buttoned my jacket. I didn't feel triumphant. There was no satisfaction. There was only a quiet final clarity. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And finally, truth had a seat in the courtroom. There's a strange thing that happens when someone tells the truth. For the first time in a long time, it doesn't sound honest. It sounds insane. So when Melissa blurted out, I was just horny in front of the judge, the attorneys, the stenographer, and a room full of strangers, the silence that followed didn't feel like understanding. It felt like disbelief. That was the day the courtroom stopped seeing her as a victim and finally saw her for what she really was. I've been Ethan Russell my whole life, same man, same work ethic, same principles. But that moment in court made me feel like I was watching my own life unravel from a distance. You think you've heard it all, until the mother of a child you thought was yours admits she shattered your family for a thrill. Not for love, not for neglect, not for emotional needs. Just because. After Melissa's outburst, her attorney scrambled. He stood up whispering something urgent into her ear, probably telling her to stop talking, but the damage was done. She sat back down, trembling, her face flushed. She avoided eye contact with me, avoided everything. The judge slowly removed her glasses, letting them rest on the bench in front of her. Mrs. Russell, she said, this court appreciates honesty, but not when it comes too late to do any good. Melissa didn't reply. She didn't have to. Ron leaned in, voice calm but heavy. Your Honor, my client is not asking for vengeance. He's not here to ruin his wife's life. He's here because he was lied to, manipulated, and misled into believing he was the father of a child that DNA has proven he is not. He looked across the aisle toward Melissa, and now she seeks reconciliation, not out of love, but out of desperation. She wants to anchor herself to the only stability she has left. I stayed quiet, let the words hang. Ron continued. If this woman truly respected the institution of marriage, she would have come clean the moment she realized the child might not be my client's. But instead, she continued the deception. She had every chance to speak up. She never did. Melissa's attorney tried to recover, pushing the narrative that she had simply made a human mistake, that her emotions got the better of her, that she regretted everything. But that line was already snapped. Her admission, raw, unfiltered, and almost vulgar, had undone every excuse they had built. And maybe that was the most honest thing she'd said in months. When the judge called a recess, I stepped outside into the hallway. I leaned against the marble wall and stared at the floor tiles. Square, cold, repetitive. Just like the cycle I'd been stuck in. Janice came to court that day. She stayed in the back, quiet, observant. She walked up to me and gently placed a hand on my arm. I never thought I'd hear that in a courtroom, she said. Neither did I. Does it help? I looked at her. It doesn't hurt. She gave a faint nod. Maybe that's all we can ask for sometimes. Back in the courtroom, Melissa didn't say another word. She stared forward, blinking often, her face hollow. The judge glanced down at the case file. This court will reconvene in 2 weeks, she said. Until then, the motion for divorce will be under consideration, as will the petition to divide shared assets. The gavel struck the block with a loud crack, and that was it for now. On the way out, Melissa finally spoke to me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a whisper. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I looked at her for a moment. There was no anger in me, no compassion either. You had 9 months to mean something better, I said. You chose this. She opened her mouth to respond but couldn't. She turned away and walked out with her attorney. I stood there for another minute watching the door slowly swing shut behind her. There's something about a truth so brutal it leaves no room for interpretation. You can't spin it. You can't soften it. You can't wrap it in excuses. It just sits there, ugly and real, but it's yours. And that somehow is freeing. It's strange how quickly a house can stop feeling like a home. The week after our court hearing, I walked through every room of what used to be ours and realized I didn't recognize a single corner anymore. The nursery still smelled faintly of lavender lotion and baby wipes. The living room still had framed photos of our wedding day, but none of it felt real. None of it felt mine. That was the day I decided to sell it all. I'm Ethan Russell, and when I say I moved on, I mean it in every sense of the word. Within a month of that hearing, I had closed on a modest 2-bedroom apartment 10 minutes from my workplace. Nothing fancy, just clean walls, solid locks, and a silence I could trust. The kind that didn't feel like someone was hiding behind it. I didn't keep any furniture from the old house. Not the couch she picked, not the bed we used to share. I wanted a full reset, new space, new habits, new peace. And for the first time in over a year, I could actually breathe. Melissa didn't take it well. I found out through my mother because Melissa had stopped reaching out to me directly. Her texts had dried up after the courtroom. The silence wasn't out of shame, though. It was fear. She knew I was done pretending to negotiate. "She's not doing well," Mom said one afternoon as we sipped coffee on my balcony. "Karen says she barely leaves the house." I didn't respond. "She's been diagnosed with postpartum depression. She's in therapy now." I nodded. "Good, she needs it." Mom looked at me carefully. "You're not angry." "I'm not anything I said." And that was the truth. I wasn't holding a grudge. I wasn't hoping she'd suffer. I just didn't want her anywhere near my life again. People kept asking if I planned to fight for custody, even after the DNA test. "No," I'd tell them, "because it's not my child." "But you raised her for 9 months," they'd say. I always replied the same way. "No, I prepared for her. That's different. Intent doesn't build paternity. Biology does. And trust seals it." I had none of those things anymore. There was one person I couldn't fully ignore, though: Karen. She called me 2 weeks after I moved out. I answered out of respect. I shouldn't have. "I know you hate her," she said without preamble, "but she's still the mother of your almost daughter." "Almost doesn't count, Karen." She sighed. "She's lost. You were the best thing in her life." Then maybe she should have protected it better. I heard her inhale deeply. "Don't you feel even a little guilty?" That one hit differently. I felt everything I said quietly. I felt guilt, shame, fury, confusion. But now I feel free. Mom kept seeing Karen from time to time. They'd known each other since high school, and that bond doesn't just vanish overnight, even if it should. To her credit, my mother kept those lines clean. "I help her with the baby," she said, "but I don't talk to her about you." I believed her. And honestly, I didn't care. If she wanted to hold the baby feed, the baby be part of that child's life, fine. That child was innocent. I had no bitterness toward the kid, just no connection. I respected that Mom had her own way of healing. She respected that mine involved distance. People often assume that moving on requires some kind of grand act: dating, again traveling, finding someone new. But for me, it was simpler. It was the quiet, the ability to sit in a chair and not wonder what else was being hidden behind a smile. To pour coffee and know no one was lying to my face across the kitchen counter. To open the front door without feeling dread. That was my version of peace. I had no intention of getting even with Melissa. But that didn't mean I forgot Cameron. One day I sent an anonymous envelope to his HR department, copies of the DNA test, selected text messages, and a typed note. "Your employee violated company ethics by engaging in a long-term affair with a married colleague, resulting in a concealed pregnancy." No threats, no accusations, just facts. 3 weeks later, I heard through a mutual contact that Cameron had been quietly let go. I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt done. That chapter was over. And I had no interest in reopening it. It was supposed to be a regular Tuesday evening. I had just wrapped up work, grabbed a takeout order from the Thai place down the street, and was unlocking my apartment door when the phone rang. I almost let it go to voicemail. The caller ID read Dolores. I hadn't heard from Melissa's mother in months. We had no reason to speak. Whatever ties once connected us had long since snapped. But something about that call, it felt different. So I answered. "Ethan," she said, voice flat. "Meet me at my house tonight. I'm Ethan Russell," and until that moment I thought my story had already reached its peak. The betrayal, the courtroom, the DNA tests, I thought those were the events I'd be telling people years from now, the worst of it. But that call led to a conversation that made everything else look almost tame. I pulled into Dolores's driveway just after 7 p.m. Her house was quiet, lights low, no TV on in the background. She opened the door before I could knock. Standing next to her, my mother. That's when I knew this wasn't going to be a casual chat. "Come in," Dolores said. I stepped inside and followed them into the living room. Sitting on the floor in front of the couch playing with toy cars was a small boy, Melissa's son. The child that DNA had proven wasn't mine. He looked up at me and smiled. "You're Grandma Linda's son." I nodded. "That's right. Nice to meet you," he said, then went right back to his cars. I sat down in the armchair. My mother handed me a glass of whiskey. No words, just a look that said, "Brace yourself." Dolores cleared her throat and sat across from me. "Melissa's dead," she said. At first I thought I misheard her. But the way my mother closed her eyes, the way the boy's name was never mentioned again that evening, I knew it was real. What I asked, my voice low. "She died last week," Dolores replied, "in Florida." My mind raced. "How?" Dolores glanced at my mother, then back at me. "She was eaten by an alligator." I blinked. "What does this son?" "She fell into a lagoon. Wildlife area near our rental. There's a record of a partial body recovery. The hand was all they found." I stared at her. You're telling me my ex-wife was killed by a gator? There was a pause. Then Dolores said it. I fed her to it. The room spun. I didn't know whether to laugh, scream, or run. I gripped the edge of my chair. She was poisoning the boy, Dolores continued. Not physically, mentally. Telling him you were the reason their life fell apart. That his real dad didn't want him because of you. That you ruined everything. My voice caught in my throat. So, you took her out. She wouldn't stop, Dolores said. I warned her. I begged her to stop dragging you into her delusions. She thought she was untouchable. I looked at my mother, who hadn't moved. She finally spoke. I went with her. I watched. I set the glass down. You're telling me you both planned this? We went to Florida together, my mom said. Just the three of us. Only two came back. There was no remorse in her voice, just certainty. Marshall is gone too, she added. My heart stopped. Cameron. He died last month, she said. Drove off a bridge on his way home. Brake line failed. I stared at them both. Are you saying he was never going to step up? My mom interrupted. But we couldn't risk him coming back later, fighting for the boy, stirring everything up. He had to go. Silence wrapped around us like ice. Then my mom placed a hand on my shoulder. Ethan, the boy, is innocent. We're both sick. Stage 4 blood cancer. Neither of us will make it past his 4th birthday. I looked at her. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for direction. He needs a parent, a stable one. Someone who won't lie to him. Someone who won't let him be used as a weapon. Dolores reached for a folder and slid it toward me. All my assets are yours. You'll be financially secure. Just give him a life, a real one. I stared at the child. He looked so small, so unaware of the storm he'd been born into. And suddenly none of it was about revenge. None of it was about betrayal. It was about responsibility. I didn't answer them that night. I drove home, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at nothing for 2 hours. But by morning, I knew what I had to do. When I woke up the next morning, I couldn't remember falling asleep. The weight of the night before was still sitting on my chest like a stone I hadn't moved. My ex-wife was dead. Her lover was dead. And the two women who'd witnessed my lowest point, my mother and Dolores, had just confessed to doing the unimaginable. And now they wanted me to become a father. To a child that wasn't even mine. I'm Ethan Russell. I've lived by logic my entire life. Calculated moves, rational decisions. Never acted on impulse. But this situation, there was no formula for it, no plan to follow. Only a choice, and a heavy one at that. A part of me wanted to disappear. Another part told me I couldn't. So I got in my car and drove back to Dolores's house. When I knocked on the door, she didn't look surprised to see me. She just stepped aside and said, "He's in the living room." The boy Tim was playing with a small set of blocks on the rug. He looked up and smiled. "You came back." I nodded. I did. He didn't say anything else. Just went back to building his little fortress. That's when I knew. He wasn't just Melissa's son. He wasn't Cameron's mistake. He was a kid, a blank slate, and right now everyone around him had either lied, died, or was dying. He needed someone steady. I turned to Dolores, then to my mother, who sat nearby in a recliner. She looked even thinner than she had last week. "I'll do it," I said. Dolores exhaled relief, softening her face. She nodded and handed me a thick manila envelope. Inside paperwork, financial records, property titles, all signed and transferred in my name. "I've arranged everything," she said. "You'll never struggle. There's a trust in place. My will has been updated. And if I'd said no, I asked." She met my eyes. "I'd still give him to you. You're the only one left who won't destroy him." Over the next few days, I filed the adoption forms. Lawyers, social workers, and court dates blurred together. They all asked the same thing in different ways. "Why are you doing this?" And I told them the truth because someone has to. A week later, it was official. Tim Russell. No hyphen, no middle name, just mine. I stared at the certificate in my hands and felt something I hadn't in years resolve. Mom was quiet after everything finalized. She spent most of her time resting, drifting between fatigue and focus. When she had energy, she talked to Tim, taught him songs, read him books, watched him like he was the only piece of good she had left to give this world. One afternoon, she sat me down and said, "I want you to date again." I nearly laughed. "You're serious?" As cancer, she replied, deadpan. "You're a good man, Ethan. Don't let what happened steal your future." "I just adopted a kid," I said, trying to deflect. "I'm not exactly dating material." She shook her head. "You're more ready than you think." A week later, she set me up with someone. A woman named Kelly. Veteran, Mom said. Widowed, no kids. Smart, strong. The type who won't cheat because she has better things to do. I resisted at first, but one dinner turned into three. Kelly had a way of listening without judging, of asking without prying. She didn't treat me like a broken man or a charity case. She treated me like someone worth knowing. 6 months later, we got married in a quiet ceremony. No fanfare, just close friends and family. My mother sat front row beaming despite the oxygen tank beside her. Dolores, frail but determined, stood beside Tim. Her final gift to us wasn't money, it was presence. 2 months after the wedding, Mom passed. Dolores followed a few weeks later. Both of them slipped away quietly, like they had done what they came to do. I didn't cry at the funerals. Not because I wasn't sad, but because grief was different now. It wasn't a collapse, it was a weight I'd learned to carry. A month later, Kelly sat beside me on the couch, smiling quietly as Tim showed her a drawing he made. Then she turned to me, took my hand, and said, "I'm pregnant." I didn't say anything at first. I just pulled her close, resting my hand on her belly, already imagining the life growing inside her. A life we would build together. No lies, no shadows, just light. It's strange what we end up holding on to. An old mug, a key with no door, a photo that doesn't mean what it used to. For me, it was a diary, a small leather-bound journal with frayed corners and a loose binding. I found it one quiet Saturday afternoon, tucked inside a drawer in my mother's nightstand. I was packing up her things, sorting through what to donate, what to keep. I almost missed it until it fell open, and out slipped a photograph that changed everything. I'm Ethan Russell. I've told you about the lies, the betrayal, the courtroom. But this was something I never expected. Not because it was painful, but because it was buried so deep, I don't think even Mom planned for me to find it. The photo showed two young women in military uniforms. One was my mother, the other was Dolores. Their expressions were sharp, eyes focused, posture rigid, like they were waiting for a mission brief. On the back, in faded blue ink, it read, Langley VO 1999, George Bush Center for Intelligence. My jaw clenched. I stared at the words, then at their faces again. Younger, harder, different. They weren't just military women. They had been in intelligence. Later that evening, I asked my wife Kelly about it. We were sitting on the back porch watching Tim chase a paper airplane through the yard. She never mentioned anything I said, holding the photo up. Kelly squinted. Your mom was CIA? Looks that way. She leaned back in the chair. That explains a lot. I laughed, but it wasn't just amusement. It was a realization, all the calm under pressure, the subtle way she read people, the stoicism. It wasn't just her personality, it was training. And suddenly everything about her made more sense. I dug deeper into the diary. It wasn't detailed, no classified intel, no operations. Just reflections, snippets, pieces of a past she rarely spoke about. One line stood out. Dolores and I made it through the Gulf, through years of silence, through things no one would ever understand. I would trust her with my life, and I did. If Ethan ever finds out, I hope he doesn't hate me for the things I never said. I didn't. Not even close. I sat on the edge of the bed that night, watching Kelly sleep, hand resting gently on her pregnant belly. A boy, the doctor had told us. A fresh start, a new name, a clean slate. And yet I couldn't stop thinking about everything that led me here. The lies, the divorce, the courtroom, the death. The child I didn't father but had chosen anyway. I was living a life built on ruins, and somehow it was more solid than anything that had come before. Tim adapted fast. He didn't ask many questions. At his age, he didn't need to know the whole story, just that he was safe, loved, and home. We kept the routine simple. Breakfast together, walks to the park, reading before bed. I didn't try to be a perfect father, just a present one. Kelly fit into the role like she'd been born for it. Patient, honest, no nonsense. She didn't treat Tim like a reminder of another woman's mistake. She treated him like a child who deserved love. She treated me the same way. And that was something I never knew I needed until it was given freely. As the pregnancy progressed, our lives found a rhythm. Not glamorous, not dramatic, but real. That kind of normal that feels like a reward after a lifetime of being tested. I still carried the weight of everything that happened. I don't think that ever goes away, but it stopped defining me. Instead, it became fuel for protection, for patience, for gratitude. One afternoon, while helping Tim with homework, he looked up and asked, "Do I have your name?" I paused. "Yes, you do." He nodded thoughtfully, then went back to his spelling worksheet. That was it. No follow-up, no confusion, just a quiet understanding. In time, I found peace not by forgetting the past, but by accepting it. My mother and Dolores had done what they believed was necessary. Right or wrong, they acted with purpose, and I was living proof of the life they'd fought to protect. A life I would now carry forward. The baby was due in 2 months. We hadn't picked a name yet, but we'd built something stronger than names or bloodlines, something built on choice, trust, and the quiet kind of love that never asked for applause. Only presence. I never expected to become the kind of man who checks baby monitors at night, who memorizes preschool snack schedules, or who knows the difference between a stroller and a travel system. But here I am, Ethan Russell, 42 years old, father of two, and somehow still standing. If you had told me 3 years ago that I'd be living this life married again, raising a boy who isn't biologically mine, with another son on the way, I would have laughed. Not because it sounded unbelievable, but because it sounded impossible. Tim is 5 now. He runs like the wind talks a mile a minute and has this habit of narrating everything he does like he's the main character in a cartoon. Some nights when I'm tucking him in, he'll still ask little things. Did you always know I'd be your son? No, I answer honestly, but I'm glad you are. That's all he needs. And sometimes that's all I need too. Our second son, Colin, was born last spring. Kelly handled the birth like a Marine on a mission. Calm, focused, unshaken. When they placed him in my arms, I felt something I hadn't known I was missing, this raw, full-circle sense of healing. Holding him didn't erase the past, but it added weight to the present, and that was enough. After Mom and Dolores passed, I kept their things in a small storage closet at home. For months, I didn't touch them. Couldn't. The grief wasn't sharp, it was quiet and patient, like a shadow that followed me everywhere. But one rainy afternoon, I finally opened those boxes. Inside were old photographs, medals, and a folded American flag. I framed the photo I'd found in Mom's diary, the one from Langley, with both of them in uniform. It hangs in my home office now. A reminder, not just of who they were, but what they gave up. I don't talk about how they died. Not with Tim. Not with anyone outside the family. It's not a secret, but it's not a story that needs to live beyond the walls of our home. The world wouldn't understand. And honestly, it's not their story to understand. It's ours. Sometimes people ask me how I managed to forgive. I always tell them the same thing. I didn't. I didn't forgive Melissa. I didn't forget what she did. But I learned that not forgiving doesn't mean holding on to hate. It just means choosing not to carry it any further. I set it down and walked forward without it. Kelly has been the bridge between who I was and who I've become. She never tried to fix me, never acted like I was broken. She just stood beside me day after day, offering something better than comfort. Consistency. She is without question the best decision I never saw coming. We don't live in a big house, we don't drive fancy cars. But what we do have is solid morning chaos with cereal bowls and missing socks, quiet evenings on the porch, 2 kids fast asleep in their beds. Peace. Real peace. The kind that isn't flashy or loud but shows up every single day. Last week, Tim had a school project, Who's Your Hero? He drew a picture of me. Stick figure, glasses, a big smile. One hand holding his, the other holding baby Colin. Underneath it, he wrote, "My dad saved me." He didn't know what those words really meant, but I did. Not long ago, I drove out to the cemetery with both boys. It wasn't a holiday or an anniversary, just a quiet afternoon when the sky felt heavy and I needed to say something. I knelt by their graves, brushing away leaves and dirt. "Everything's good," I told them. "He's safe. They both are." Tim stood beside me, holding my hand. "Is this Grandma Linda?" he asked. I nodded. "And Grandma D, that's what we told him to call Dolores." "Yeah, buddy. Do they know we love them?" "They do now." We drove home in silence, windows cracked, the cool breeze filling the car. Tim hummed softly in the back seat, completely unaware of how many lives had to collide, collapse, and rebuild to give him this moment of calm. And maybe that's how it should be. He doesn't carry the past. I'll carry it for him. So that's the story. Not of a man who lost everything, but of a man who survived everything and came out the other side with more than he ever thought possible. A son, a second chance, and peace that no one could take away.